Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast, Season 3, Episode 8, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. This week, the return of Two Idiots Discuss Sports, the advent of the 2023 Major League Baseball season. As we are wont to do, Brian and I start by talking about baseball and then wander into numerous other sports-related topics. Come along for the ride. And yes, I understand that under the auspices of that introduction, that most of my female listeners are not going to listen to this episode. So be it. That is freedom of choice at its finest. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, heart, whatever the mode of engagement is on the platform that you use, your platform of choice. Also, if you like what you hear, give us some support. This is Why I Don't Vote podcast on Patreon. Without further ado.
Act 1, Two Idiots Discuss Sports, the 2023 baseball season, and more.
For the first time in the year of our Lord, 2023, back by popular demand, and by way of popular demand, there have been at least two people off the top of my head that have asked, where is my Two Idiots Discuss Sports? Well, here it is. Brian comes back on the podcast to discuss the Major League Baseball season and whatever the hell else we decide to talk about. Brian, how are you doing?
Mr. PTN, Mr. Knackley, things are well here. On the eastern seaboard, close to the nation's capital, where things are still crazy at times, but everything is well, my friend. We got our first 80-degree day in Northern Virginia today. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping. It was a good day. Things are good. How are things your way?
It's funny you say you got your first 80-degree day. I could probably count on my two hands how many 80-degree days we've had here. It was one of the coldest spring trainings that I can remember. I only went to 2 games where I had ambitions to go to many more, but the games were cold. I mean, it was cold outside going to a spring training game. When you go to a spring training game and it's 1 p.m. in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's 59 degrees or 62 degrees, you feel like you're being cheated.
Yeah, you were saying you can count on 2 hands how many 80-degree days. I assumed you were going to go the other way, and it was going to be above 80 degrees or above 90 degrees for the rest of the time. You only had a handful that were below that 90-degree limit. That's cold, my friend. That's not why you moved to the Valley of the Sun.
No, it's not, and many of us in the Valley are optimistic, fingers crossed, that what this will mean is a mild summer. And there is another contingent, I'm starting to slowly fade into it, that's concerned that we're not going to have a real spring as we know it here, where you've got those beautiful 85 to 90 degree days for 6 or 8 weeks, and it's just going to jump straight into 100 here in the next 30 days, which I'm hoping to hell does not happen.
Yeah, that's what I found when I moved to the greater Northern Virginia region is spring doesn't exist here. It's cold and then it's hot. As a matter of fact, the first spring that I was here, I asked my beautiful wife. It was mid-April, coming from Atlanta. Birds would be chirping, azaleas blooming. Northern Virginia, I'm still cold. I asked her, I said, when does it become spring here? She looked at me with a straight face and said, June. So, to have an 80-degree day, early April. Now, granted, it was 56 yesterday, but looks like we're going to have a run of a couple days. So super excited about it. The weather has turned. The weather has turned, which, as you know, leads to one major event as well, and that is the coming of what you and I have been waiting for, the Major League Baseball season. Let's get it on.
Let's get it on. And already, at least in my world, the pitch clock has it's reared its ugly head and made an appearance. I don't know if you saw the Mets got blown out by the Brewers. The starting pitcher for the Mets, Carrasco, on his very first pitch, did not throw the ball, not close to the timer, just missed it completely. And
Yeah.
And so it was 1-0 before he ever threw a pitch.
Yeah, it's interesting. So back to my beautiful wife, we actually went to opening day this year. It was a special year, right? The Braves are in town playing the Nationals. We got to opening day. We significantly overpaid for tickets. I don't know how they get away with this, but we significantly overpaid for tickets. But as we're going down, I'm talking to her. We got about a 40-minute drive down to the ballpark, which is beautiful. They've done everything and all the renovations around. What is it? Southeast, I believe, is the general area in DC. They call it.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's beautiful. But I started giving her the rundown on the rules changes. And she said, well, wait a minute. What do you mean they only have so much time to throw a pitch? I said, yeah, if they don't throw it in time, it's a ball. I said, here's the other kicker. If the guy that's going to try to hit the ball isn't ready to hit the ball in time, there's going to be a strike on him. She's like, that's just crazy. Then we get into the size of the bases, which she immediately started researching, that are, approximately 3 inches bigger all around. We're going to have an interesting Major League Baseball season, my friend. The good news is that game times are down significantly. We're down about 30 minutes, which is a win and which was the goal. We don't need somebody, Nomar Garciaparra, fiddling with his batting gloves for 30 seconds between pitches. But at the same time, at some point, do you need a minute? Yeah, sometimes you need a minute. But that minute right now is either going to cost your ball or a strike.
So the first spring training game that I went to, the final score was 6-4. And the game was 2 hours and 21 minutes.
Wow.
So that illustrates, and of course, if there's anybody here who's not a true baseball fan and is still listening, 2 hours and 21 minutes is usually a pitcher's duel. So to get to 6-4 and still be able to complete an entire baseball game in 2 hours and 21 minutes, that's a feat. And so that's a testament to the rules change actually accomplishing the goal of let's make the game faster. And if it's faster, let's hope that we can generate more interest in the younger generations. The one, and I'm not sure that that's actually going to work, but at least that's the thought process. The one thing that I have not found a real solid explanation as to why it's scientifically or mathematically or logistically so much better to have the bases as big as a pizza box. But they went ahead and did it. And it's goofy. Like when you go out there, I don't know how you felt, but when you go out and you look, the bases it just looks strange. For someone who watches so much baseball, to see those pizza boxes out there, it looks goofy.
Yeah, so personally, let me address first off the timing. 2 hours and 21 minutes for a 6-4 game is tremendous.
Agreed.
And I don't think it's more for that younger generation. What it is for everybody else that jumped off the podcast about 30 seconds ago that are the casual fans, right? Let's make the game quicker so people will stay intrigued longer.
Okay.
And
fair.
I think that's really where the mindset is. You got casual fans that are sitting there for 3.5 hours. Nobody wants to sit there and watch a game for 3.5 hours. Nobody wants to invest that time. Now, I do, much to my wife's chagrin, but she doesn't either. If we can get this thing knocked down to 2.5 hours, it makes life a lot easier if you're sitting there and watching a game on television. It makes it much more pleasurable if you're sitting there and not having to go to your phone in between pitches. So I think from that perspective, I think it will. That's the goal, of course. Whether it happens or not, we don't know. But, if you can bring the casual fan back by shortening the game, that's a really good thing. The bases, So there are two parts to this, right? So you've got the bases that are now bigger, and you've got the fact that a pitcher can only throw 2 pickoff moves. They can only try to pick off a runner on a base twice. To those that don't know baseball, what is a pickoff move? It's when pitcher standing on mound throws towards base where runner is trying to get run so runner doesn't steal base, right? You can only do that twice.
Right.
So, one, the bigger bases are going to get away from that bang-bang play, which there's still going to be bang-bang plays. It's just going to be a longer bang. I didn't notice it. Honestly, I watched my first game on television last night just because of the way that the Braves games were this weekend. So I didn't really notice it. I didn't notice it much in spring training. I did notice watching a game live how players on first base are reacting after the pitcher has already thrown 2 pitches to first base to try to keep that runner on first base, and how much of a lead they're now taking, which that coupled with the fact that you've got, even if it's just inches shorter between bases, I think it's going to account for a lot more stolen bases this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe that was the thought process that if we want the game to be faster, we want it to be more action-packed. How can we accomplish both of these things? Okay, faster, we can put a clock on both the hitter and the pitcher. And excitement, well, how do we generate excitement outside of a home run? You know, people really don't hit and run. They don't steal bases. Teams. You know, the philosophy has not endured. You know, when you and I were younger, so many different teams played what you would call small ball, and they're moving runners along. They're trying to steal bases. So I guess, hey, if they won't do it philosophically, let's change the rules to make it advantageous for them to do so.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, it's, you know, to your point, and that's something I was going to hit on as well. Nobody bunts anymore.
Right.
There's not a bunt. The Braves won an entire season last year without a sacrifice bunt. Without one through 162 games. And again, my wife during the game says, why doesn't anybody bunt anymore? It's not a part of the game. It's launch angles. It is bat speed. And it is, can I steal a base? You know, you've got to get excitement back into the game. That's exactly 100% why they did it. It's why the bases are bigger. It's why they can only throw over twice. That in speed of the game. And it's why they got rid of the shift, which was one of the dumbest alignments in sports ever created, though it did work. But you get rid of the shift. Batting averages are up. You know, teams are trying to get around that here and there. But all of these things are to make America's game, Major League Baseball, more fun and more pleasurable to watch. And the more that they watch, the more interest that they get, the more money everybody makes, and the more enjoyable it is for everyone. So if you like sports, you want to get in, get out, and not be there for 4 hours, right? But I think they're doing it. I think they're doing a great job with it so far.
One of the interesting things you just mentioned, okay, so we're going to get rid of the shift by way of a rule. There's a way you could have gotten rid of the shift, and it's called the bunt, and the players just refuse to do it. You know, that's one of the absurdities of the fact that a team like the Braves, who was so successful, could go an entire season without one bunt, where you had numerous situations where the team in the field is shifting, leaving a massive gap, a massive hole open, and you could even do a half swing, any type of bunt over to that side of the field, and would have been man on base, practically guaranteed, and yet the players still won't bunt. And so they had to make a rule saying the shift is illegal because it's so effective because you idiots won't bunt.
Yes. And I think that, you know, the half swing, I think, listen, if they could do a half swing, they could hit to the other side of the field, which they're not doing. does the bunt and the way that they were set up, whether it was a left-handed batter trying to, I don't know, man. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's an entire space on the field that's wide open, and nobody's taking advantage of it. So, so the shift is gone to an extent, right? And then all of a sudden, who was it? Somebody in spring training, I think it was the Red Sox, pulled the left fielder over to play between first and second base. And now there's this gaping hole in left field that nobody can hit. In the minor leagues last year, they actually drew lines coming off of the sides of the bases, so it made the lines in the second base made a V, and you couldn't cross that line. I think now you can't cross over a directional straight line over the base. But yeah, I mean, there's a rule in place because ball players couldn't do one of the basic fundamentals that ball players do, which is bunt the ball.
Yeah. And
bunt gone.
So, a lot of interesting rule changes. It's not the game that you and I grew up watching, and not to say that that's a bad thing, but some of the rule changes just from the philosophical inability of Major League Baseball players to bunt a baseball. I guess that's just the way it is. It's like, the millennials today. I don't understand what they're saying, and I'm not going to try to understand what they're saying. I'm just going to go along with what, what the outcome is of their lexicon. I'll suffer through the EDM in a gas station in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that's that. So let's talk about, Brian, the NL East, which is, our stomping ground. We might as well get it out of the way because I know from some of the text that you sent me, you're ready to not lash out, but you're ready to cajole me. The New York Metropolitans, most irrelevant of all the sports in their international play, the what do they call it? The World Cup, the
Baseball Classic.
The Baseball Classic. The pitcher for the New York Metropolitans, who closes the games for the New York Metropolitans, one Mr. Edwin Diaz, in a fit of excitement, playing in, again, what is an irrelevant tournament prior to the season, strikes out the side, jumps up and down, and blows out his knee. Could not be a more Lol Mets moment, right? That dark, that creepy skeleton hand reaching out of the grave that has Lol Mets written across the tombstone, rearing its ugly head again to lash out, saying, maybe you thought I was dead, but the zombie phenomenon does exist. Zombie Lol Mets here in 2023. Your thoughts?
I reaching out of the grave with a skull hand, with a skeletal hand that is grasping a very large bag of money.
Yes, that's true.
As your Lol Mets and Mr. Cohen advanced the worlds of science and spent $340 million on a team this year. The Steve Cohen tax is in full effect. Let me talk two things. One, let's talk World Baseball Classic, right? And the as you mentioned, irrelevance of the tournament. And I will give you this in the fact that, does it matter in the realm of the Major League Baseball season? No, it doesn't, much like the Major League Baseball All-Star game does not matter, right?
Okay.
Does the World Cup matter to the Major League Soccer or Premier League? No, it does not. But it matters to a lot of people. And that's one thing that I've noticed over the past couple of years when, just by following local beat writers, covering Braves that are playing in the Venezuela League, or wherever they might be. There is absolute 100% emotion in those games. It's not a stale product. They get after each other. They get after it. They hit home runs. They throw bats, and they make noise. Now, to the get off my lawn baseball guy, as you were just kind of describing.
Who is me?
What's that?
That's me. I'm get off. I'm kicking rocks.
Right. Let's put it easier. Let's call it the traditionalist, right? To the baseball traditionalist, those types of things are bad. See Brian McCann. But here's the thing. If you looked at that tournament and you looked at the teams that were put together by country and the solidarity that was created by country, right? The Dominicans had blue hair, the Puerto Ricans had white hair, or vice versa. I can't recall which one. But the solidarity that's built into it, and then you look at the crowds, right? You had games out in Arizona.
Yes.
Those games were much more widely attended than anticipated, right?
Yes. People went. I'm not going to deny that.
Went. What does that do? Is it grows the game. Now, that doesn't take away – don't take away from that growing the game to Edwin Diaz being an idiot and blowing his ACL out, jumping up and down. Because that could have happened in his bathroom. World Baseball Classic didn't do that.
All right, I'm going to
give happened in his bathroom.
Yeah, right? let me give you a counterpoint here. Let me give you a counterpoint. Because I'm also, as you know, a big hockey fan. And they used to have what they called in the hockey world the Canada Cup. And it was the exact same concept. It was all of the nations around the world that would come to Canada, and then, of course, in North America, because it's all about money, but they would play by the Canadian rules. And it was a solution, as Canadians would probably refer to it, to this horrid, awful game that they called the Olympic game, which was, in their minds, way too big and too spread out. So they never thought that was a legitimate international tournament in the first place. Hey, if you really want to play international hockey, you come to North America, you come to Canada, you play by the Canadian rules. Those tournaments grew the game. They were extremely popular all around the world. They were highly competitive, and the owners hated it because players went down in droves because they cared so goddamn much. It eventually faded out because the owners were able to say, okay, yes, this is well loved, and yes, this does grow the game, but it is costing us too much money by way of players that are injured, players that are not in game shape anymore because of this tournament. And if we're going to allow the professional players to play in the Olympics, we can't have the Canada Cup anymore. It's just too much. I actually didn't object. As much as I love the Canada Cup and think they should still do it, I understood. I'd much rather them say, hell, don't let the professionals play in the Olympics, but they're never going to do that. My point being, if you're going to have a tournament that's going to compromise the ability of players to play in the actual major league season, I feel like over the course of time, the Canada Cup was around for 30 years. Over the course of time, there's going to be the Edwin Diaz's of the world because, as you said, there's just so much emotion. This thing that's relatively brand new, I think, is already seeing its life cycle. Because you have players that are getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars that in the emotion of the moment, they're not going to be able to go half speed. They're not going to be able to turn it down a notch, and they're going to get hurt.
Let me ask a question, if I may. What time of year was the Canada Cup?
It was routinely in summer, so it was probably after the NHL season.
In the 3 weeks between the end and the beginning of the NHL season.
Yes, if recollection served, it was after the NHL season, but I could be wrong about that because that is purely on recollection. It may very well have been at a different point during the NHL season, but I'm pretty sure that it was after the Stanley Cup.
So, and that makes sense, right? Because you can't do it. You can't do something like that mid-season. You do all-star games mid-season, which are fluff games, right? And I don't care what it is. It would literally a fluff game with the NFL Pro Bowl this year because they're playing flag football.
Right.
But you've got the fluff games mid-season. A majority of players are at home taking that break. NHL All-Star Games, same thing, right? You can't have a majority of those players playing in that game. Now, that being said, if I'm not mistaken, the Canadian Cup lasted for about 15, 16 years. The World Baseball Classic, and I'm assuming that was an annual tournament. Is that correct?
No. So it lasted much longer because it was not an annual tournament. The Canada Cup was either every 2 years or every 4 years. They didn't play it every year. So it was a big deal. It actually had more significance because it was not an annual tournament. Yeah,
it looks like ballpark at every 4 years.
Okay.
Right? Plus or minus. I think World Baseball Classic, it's been around since 2006. Man, we're old. Time has gone.
My God. Has it really been 2006?
2006.
My shit.
So here's what I found recently. Not only did COVID make me lose 2 years, I think I lost like 5 years.
Agreed.
I don't know how, but it happened. And March of 2023 did not exist for me whatsoever. In any way, shape, or form, it seems like. Time flies by, right? But this thing's been around since 2006. This is the third time Japan's won it.
Oh, my God.
So, though it hasn't been as prominent, it's gotten the run. Now, here's the big difference, and I think this is what you absolutely have to consider. Here's the big difference between the World Baseball Classic as it is and the Canadian Cup as it was. First and foremost, let's talk about aggression in sports. Other than somebody randomly throwing at somebody's head in a baseball game, there's not much hand-to-hand combat. Would you agree?
This is fair.
Okay. Is there hand-to-hand combat in hockey?
Keith Kachuk,
okay.
with purpose. Specifically brought down on Claude Lemieux's nose, his elbow, after Claude Lemieux gave him a high check and broke his nose, and I applauded him as an American patriot.
Yes, violence is hockey. Hockey is violence. Football is life, Danny. Football is life. Hockey is violence, right? So, yes, you're going to have more injuries. Why? Because it's played at a very, very high speed. This tournament was late 70s to early 90s, which could possibly be the most violent time in hockey, right?
Yes.
Two different sports.
Yes.
Also 2 different times. Now, if this was a time in the world and we were doing this tournament in the beginning of spring training, not in December. First off, if they did it in November, nobody would play because everybody's tired. They played 162 games. They're done. Right?
Yes.
On the front side of that, would you agree or disagree that athletes today take better care? Well, do they take better care or worse care of their bodies in the off season?
Oh, they obviously take better care.
Absolutely. Right. So players come to spring training ready to play. The only thing that they don't have is the speed of the game. They've got the weights. They don't need to work out, right? They're not coming in to spring training 30 pounds overweight unless you're Marcelo Zuna and we won't even get into him right now. But the moral of that story is it doesn't matter when you would play that tournament. The same thing would happen. The same thing could have happened to him the first week of the season, right?
Well, if he's going to pull a stunt like that, yeah.
There is not. But when you've got American players that played in the World Baseball Classic, as much hyperbole as it was, who said it's one of the greatest baseball experiences they've had, not just playing for their quote-unquote playing for the country, but just the environments they were playing in February, early March, not February, but March, like packed houses. Can you imagine? I saw on the Braves spring training schedule, the Dominican and Puerto Rico were playing back to back. I texted a buddy of mine. I said, "Hey, do you want to go down for spring training?" Because the Dominican is stacked. Like, you look at the talent that's on these teams, the all-star teams just by country is staggering. So I think what that does is it changes things, if only for 3 weeks. And I think it is a phenomenal lead-in to the Major League Baseball season. I don't think that there is any more risk on it because Brandon Nimmo hurt his wrist sliding into second base during spring training, not during the World Baseball Classic. Just because Edwin Diaz is an idiot, don't blame baseball. Hashtag Patrick, don't blame baseball.
Well, that's all fair. Very good points, very well articulated, and I'm going to have to sit with that because, I didn't watch any of the World Baseball Classic, really. I haven't really cared about it, and in my mind this season, and yes, we are old, and this does show the area, one of the many in my life, where I've got this ancient is probably a better word, energy about, 2006, my God, I had no idea it'd been around that long. So maybe I'm going to have to revisit the World Baseball Classic and its relation to baseball, and maybe even try to find some of the enthusiasm that it seems everybody else has for it. But given that we've decided to talk about baseball, Brian, and we're 32 minutes in and we haven't discussed in any substantive way either of the teams we root for. Let's see if we can't get 5 or 6 minutes on the NL East. Was a little surprised. I'm gonna start in a spot where we did not discuss, but the Phillies, being the Phillies, starting out the season forgetting to win any baseball games. It seems like they reverted back to the Phillies of mid 2022. Did you see that?
They don't win baseball no more. It's interesting. So Phillies 0-4, and the National League East is the gauntlet of all gauntlet. And I'm not going to go to the whole recency bias and hyperbole that we've never seen a division this hard, but the amount of talent top to bottom, even with the Nats, which are not great, they had the worst record in baseball last year, but top to bottom with the talent is absolutely tremendous, right? We talked about, I mentioned, your Lol Mets that have spent $500 million almost on every contract. It's a gauntlet. It's tough. And then you see the Phillies that spent money. They lost their first baseman, not due to the Baseball Classic, but just because, baseball's baseball. But they're 0-4. They start out against Texas. Jacob deGrom, his first start as the Texas Ranger, and he shut him down completely up until their bullpen came in, and the Phillies scored a couple runs, and then the Rangers came back because the Phillies bullpen stinks. So, the reigning NLCS or National League pennant champions, the Philadelphia Phillies, are 0-4. Miami's not much better. We'll see what happens there. The Nats are the Nats, and then you've got the Mets and the Braves right now. And, we're 5-6 games in. We got 157 left. We'll be okay. Everybody will be okay. But Yeah, I mean, you can't fall too far behind too quick. It'll come back to bite you.
I agree with this, and I'm concerned for the Mets. You know, again, it's always going to be pitching when you talk about the Mets. I do like the staff on paper. Verlander's old. He is showing it, not starting the season. I'm not too sure about what we're going to get out of Scherzer this season, although, you know, his grit determination is always going to be there, but he's old too. And when the top of your lineup is old, you know, can't get around it, they're old, you've got question marks down at the bottom of the lineup. You're putting a lot more pressure on those guys, particularly one that comes out and says, you know, I'm not so sure about this pitch clock, and the very first pitch that he throws is not a pitch. It's him getting a delay, and he gets shelled for what, I think 5 earned runs in 3 in a third inning or whatever it was, and the Mets lose 10-0. So that's going to be, you know, again, we're so early on in the season, who knows how this thing is going to play out. But it doesn't look good when, you know, you pay whatever ungodly amount you pay to get Verlander. He doesn't start the season. You put pressure on the rest of the lineup, and one guy shits the bed in his first week.
Yeah, it's not good, you know. And I think the Law Mets just may be the old Mets this year because they are old. You know, you got Scherzer, who's 38. Verlander's 39. Signed a 2-year, $87 million contract. He's 40, actually. But I'm sitting here just looking down the lineup. There's a lot of guys with a 3 that start in their age, and some of it's a 3 and a middle number.
Yes,
a crooked number. Yeah. They are old, and they're old with a lot of money. You got to be careful there. And with Verlander out on the DL. Don't know. There's no timeline for his return. He'll come back. He'll be gritty. If you get Verlander for 3/4 of the season, you've made your money, right? You've done a good job. It's a good spend. If it is Justin Verlander, right? If you're in the heat of a pennant chase and you're getting close to the All-Star break and you're just getting back Verlander, that's as good as making a trade at the deadline. So you're okay, but you gotta worry about wear and tear, and that was the reason that nobody wanted to sign. Well, I don't say nobody, but there was a limit on what they were going to pay. Anybody was going to pay to Grom because he is old, and you know he's not late 30s, but he's mid 30s, and he's broken a lot.
Yes.
So
which is
you gotta be careful. It's gonna be a long season. I think that the Diaz thing with the Mets, as much as I'm a anti-Mets guy, that's hard to see, right? Because you want to talk about advancing the game and excitement for the sport. That's Edwin Diaz, right? Even though he stole the Tommy Tune thing, the Tommy Trumpet thing, that's fine. I get it. Contreras isn't part of the Braves anymore. That's okay. But, you know, that's not great for the game. It is what it is. It's baseball. You know, it's tough to see. You know, you think in the back of your head, you kind of cheer for it as a Braves fan, but you don't want to cheer for somebody getting hurt. It is still tough to see, but you just hope that, you know, this is the time, and that's the key phrase. This is the time of hope. This is the time that, you know, every baseball fan, I don't care who you are, I don't care if your team was the worst in baseball last year. Right now it's all about hope, right? We still got a chance. So the Cubs mantra for generations. And you just hope you can continue without getting too beat up, right? You hope the bullpen works out. You hope the starting pitchers work out. You hope you don't get players that are injured for any length of time. But injuries are going to happen. You just hope you've got enough depth as a team that you can get through these things, carry on, and hopefully have something to cheer a whole lot about come early August, early September.
Well, I wouldn't be a good host if I didn't let you have at least a couple of minutes to get on the Braves bandwagon. Where do you see the Braves finishing this season? And if it's where I think you think that where I feel you feel that they will end up, can they beat the Astros? Because I think the Astros are a juggernaut.
Cautiously optimistic, as always. Right? Listen, I grew up I went to college at West Virginia University. I learned years and years ago, don't get too hyped up about a good season of past because the next season is going to bite you in the butt. Cautiously optimistic. I think it comes down to a few things. Braves made some tremendous offseason moves, kind of under the radar. Picked up one of the best catchers in baseball in Sean Murphy from the A's. Lost our version of Tommy Trumpet, Will Contreras, to Milwaukee during that trade. We lost Dansby Swanson. Why? Because the shortstop market went out of control. Dansby got 6 years, 177, which is more than what Freddie Freeman got paid, which is absolutely insane. Insane. Now, Dansby started off well. He's hitting over 500. He's had 18 at-bats. He did not have a good spring. But time will tell. He's doing okay. Hasn't had any strikeouts, so that's a good thing. I got nothing but love for Dansby overall. It's business decision. Do what you got to do. But that being said, Braves got a couple of rookies that they had laid some, I don't want to say hopes, but had laid some sights on. Can they get better? Can they get through a season? And through spring training, they just didn't pan out. Good news, they had a really good utility player in Orlando Arcia. They picked up from the Brewers a few years ago. Is he going to have the caliber of year that Dansby had last year? No. But Dansby didn't have the caliber of year that Dansby had last year or the year before. Right? Last year was Dansby's anomaly. Called his breakout year, but it was definitely an anomaly. Can you get serviceable? Yes. He's shown outstanding defense. Offensively, ironically, he got the first RBI of the season. So I think there's a question. Left field's a question, or was a question. We still have the consummate convict, Marcell Ozuna.
Oh, yeah.
On our team, who can't hit a baseball. Has one home run right now, but otherwise strikes out a lot. And he doesn't run so good, and he can't throw so good. So he's got one use and one use only, and that's to hit the ball. And if you're not hitting the ball, you got to go somewhere else. I think those two things are the big factors. The rest of the team is locked up. Right, between catcher, first base, second base, shortstop, center field, and right field, everybody's locked up. You got a couple of pitchers locked up. I think it's going to come down to 38-year-old Charlie Morton and what he can give you this season. He did not have a good showing last night, but it's a long season and he gets better as the time goes on. And what happens in the fifth starter spot with the Braves. That said, I still think that they win it. It'll be a dogfight, but they are going to win it. I think the Braves and the Mets will both win over 100 games again, possibly go to the Giants, Dodgers 106, 105 game season a few years ago. And they have enough firepower to beat the Astros. They've done it before. The question now becomes, can the pitching hold off in long enough to get that done? And many may not recall, you may not recall, because nobody's listening anymore. You may not recall. Last year, Max Fried didn't play in the playoffs. They lost in the divisional series to the Phillies. Max Fried didn't pitch.
Right. No, I do remember that.
He had come down with a virus and didn't pitch at all. Spencer Strider had an oblique. So what essentially are the number one and number two pitchers this year didn't pitch in the postseason last year. So what does it come down to as always? It comes down to health, and it comes down, are you hot at the right time?
Hey, that's what every sport you could probably say the same thing, right? It comes down to how healthy you are, and are you hot going into the playoffs versus starting out hot and then limping into the playoffs. Well, Brian, I would like to go further into the depths of the lineups in both New York and Atlanta, but we are now scraping against 45 minutes, so I'm going to save that for the next installment of Two Idiots Discuss Sports when I bring you back, and it's either at the midway point of the baseball season, or when we have on the collective after the Washington Commanders are sold?
Oh, counting down the days for that to come through, my friend. Mr. Knackley, Daddy-O, it is always a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate everyone who has still stayed on and continued to listen, and I look forward to the next time.
Love it, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Be good.
Act 2 episode epilogue.
Trump gets indicted, the Nord Stream pipeline cover-up, the fall of the petrodollar. So many things to talk about this week that I did not get to because I really wanted to do an episode of Two Idiots Discuss Sports. I will try to cover these topics in subsequent episodes to the extent that any of the updates that have come out about these topics are in fact legitimate, that commenting on them would be worth my time and energy versus it just being more speculation. I have no qualms about speculating about sports. That is a subject matter, a topic that invites speculation. It's part of the charm, hell, part of the fabric of being a sports fan is engaging in speculation. When it comes to topics of national or international importance, I prefer not to do it. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.